Continuing our series on helping our kids develop courage. And we're on number 4 today. Number 4 is build up a little data bank of personal testimonies and tell your kids in story form. So the thing is, testimonies, I don't know about you, one of the things that builds up my faith more than anything else is not getting instructions from somebody or somebody telling me how I should feel or how I should think, but actually hearing somebody else's story about how God helped them overcome fear or how God came through for them in a very difficult situation. Testimonies often provide a great way to share God's protection or God's power or God's provision with your kids because they love hearing stories. So do adults. In fact, watch this. Next time you're in church and the pastor is preaching and he's blah, 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 blah. The Greek word for this is blah, and here's an application and blah, blah, blah. I remember one time when I just watched the way everybody's head goes from this to this. I guarantee you're going to see a lot of heads popping up when the preacher moves to story form. So back to your kids. Their minds switch from processing information to processing images of the places and events that you're telling about in your personal testimony of God's protection or God's empowerment or God filling you with courage and boldness. Share the ways that God has protected or encouraged you or somebody you know. Share times when you prayed for courage and got it, and all the blessings that has brought you. I read about one mother who took a job teaching in spite of having panic disorders. She was terrified, but told her children she was trusting God to help her get over it. Her biggest fear was of having to return home after just a few days of teaching because of having to quit for not controlling her fear. Because she told her children, they got to watch her grow from a timid, homebound fear junkie into a dynamic teacher who often spoke at assemblies about overcoming fears. So we can give our kids the stories of what's happened in the past. We can show our kids the stories of what's happening now. Where do you struggle with fear? Now, I'm not suggesting that you go to your kids and say, kids, I just looked at our bank account and we have no money in it, and I just lost my job, and we are $20,000 in credit card debt. Not sure what we're going to do or how we're going to make it even till tomorrow. I'm not suggesting that for a moment. What I am suggesting is, if you were in a similar situation, going to your kids and saying, you know, kids, we're having some financial challenges, and I know that God has gotten us through in the past, and I believe he's going to get us through now. And there may be a temptation for your mom and dad to fear a little bit now. But what we want to do is we want to practice courage. We want to practice trust. We want to practice together as a family, asking God to help us to trust him to get through this difficult time. That's one approach. That's an approach. Another approach could be to even tell stories from the Bible of others who were facing fearful circumstances and they stood strong. And remember, we said last time, courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is very much the presence of fear, but choosing to do the right thing in spite of feeling afraid. Moving forward and not being paralyzed, allowing God to work in you and through you and take you further into life in him in spite of the fear. And so sharing a Bible story about how somebody like Daniel, who was thrown into the lion's den, or David coming up against the giant Goliath, or many other true accounts that we read of real people in biblical history who faced fear with courage by depending on God. So challenge number 4 is build up a data bank of personal testimonies and tell your kids in story form.